one thing real quick that will probably make this easier. Let me close a bunch of things on my computer. I had the articles all ready to go. Okay.
Rabbi, this is Daniel. I don't want to interfere with your meeting, but would it be possible to record this? Oh, she is recording it. Never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind. It was
Okay. No.
question answered before
Okay.
I even got it out.
Okay. Good. I don't know why, Jennifer. On my screen, I'm trying to share my Google Chrome that's open up to 2 articles. Oh, here it is. Never mind.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah, I see what my problem was. 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see this article? Dear Jews, the summer of 2020 is not about us. Give a thumbs up or.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so sorry about the delay. So I want to tell about one thing I've heard from members, a lot, to be quite honest with you. Not that anyone is against improving race relations, but what I have heard from many members is, Rabbi, of course, I don't support racism. Of course, I want everyone to have equal rights. But Rabbi, I just can't support Black Lives Matter because of their anti-Zionist roots. And so for everyone who's said that to me, I have sent them this article that I've asked to be part of on our website as well. It's called Dear Jews, the Summer of 2020 is Not About Us. And this is written by David Suissa, who's one of my favorite writers. He's actually the editor and publisher of the Jewish Journal in Los Angeles. He's a very middle of the road, probably center right guy, actually, very pro-Israel. And he writes really sensible articles. And, you know, I encourage you to find it. You can find it on the LA Jewish Journal or on this website as well. Just type in Suissa, Dear Jews, the Summer of 2020 is not about us. But he brings up a good point. He talks about how no one can deny the fact that Blacks in America have suffered from whether it's slavery to Jim Crow to lack of full civil rights. And what we saw with George Floyd in Minneapolis several weeks ago was unfortunately something that many Blacks still deal with in our country. And I love what he writes here. Don't get me wrong. I'm disgusted by Israel haters who exploit the protests to bash Israel. But are we surprised? This is what they always do. I know that Black Lives Matter officially supports the BDS movement against Israel, which is a vile and discriminatory movement. But here's the new reality. In the protest against racism, Black Lives Matter is as much a slogan and rallying cry as an organization. And yes, I'm disgusted by anti-Jewish graffiti on a synagogue wall or anywhere else. This is the mark of Jew hatred. It is eternal and irrational. It will always be with us. There are myriad effective ways we can combat the evil of anti-Semitism without taking away from the cause of the moment. The cause of fighting racism is dominating the national consciousness right now, and many Jews have joined the fight. Both of those fights are good for the Jews. And so that's the first article I wanted to bring up with all of you, is I hear from too many of our fellow Jews that they have no interest in getting involved because, well, Black Lives Matter is an anti-Zionist organization. So I don't care what they say. Nothing they could say is okay. Nothing they could say is kosher because of their roots. And my problem with that is I think we're overlooking the big picture. We're not seeing what's really important right now. I am a very pro-Israel rabbi, as all of you know, and I do all I can to make sure Beth Yeshurun is a Zionist congregation. I'm very much against BDS, the movement to boycott, divest, or sanction the state of Israel. But with that said, I think we hurt ourselves when we refuse to get involved because of some of the founders of Black Lives Matter and the movement that they've started. And I really believe an overwhelming majority of people protesting in the streets, whether they're Black or white, could care less about Israel and have really don't even know what the charter may say. It doesn't mean we shouldn't fight to change that charter. It doesn't mean we shouldn't fight BDS. But when we don't get involved because of what we may perceive Black Lives Matter's stance on Israel, then I think we really hurt ourselves. And I'll break out one other point. I read an interesting article from another rabbi who said, let's talk about why is that in their charter? Why is that anti-Zionist language part of their founding documents? And he made a good point. He said, unfortunately, the people that were involved from the very beginning, even some of the Jews that were involved from the very beginning, weren't the most pro-Israel people. And so they allowed that to happen. In other words, when we refuse to get involved with a movement like Black Lives Matter, we just allow the anti-Zionists to continue to hijack that movement. But perhaps if we get more involved and get more involved in improving race relations, that perhaps we can change some of the language that we may find in charters like that of the Black Lives Movement that upsets us as pro-Israel Jews. And so my charge to us would be is don't use that charter as an excuse to not get involved, but use it as a justification to get even more involved. And I'll end with one example. The last 2 Martin Luther King days, my friend Ira Bleiweiss, and perhaps some of you were there, organized a Jewish contingent to participate in the Martin Luther King parade downtown. There are hundreds of organizations that participate. In this past year, for example, we had about a dozen rabbis and almost 100 members of the Jewish community. And as we marched through the streets of downtown Houston on Martin Luther King Day, we handed out Israel flags and flyers that talked about what an incredible Zionist Martin Luther King was, and how many Jews have been involved with the civil rights movement until this day. And so I think we really changed a lot of hearts and minds that day. And I was pleasantly surprised by how many people accepted our Israeli flags and accepted our flyers and were thrilled to have us there. And so I use that as an example to say that I applauded Ira and other people that were there that day. And because it was a chance to change hearts and minds, to show our fellow Black Americans that Israel is actually something I think they can support in a country they could be proud of. And it's something I want to remind our Black friends that we as Jews share a lot of their concerns. So that's the first part I wanted to bring up. Before I get to the second article I want to show you, that's kind of on a little bit of a different matter, any thoughts or discussion about what I've said so far?
I have a question, I guess, Rabbi.
Yeah.
This is Daniel. I did some research. I read an article which I recently forwarded to you from the Forward magazine, Forward Time newspaper. Anyway, and it discusses exactly what you're talking about. I did some research after that, and as I understand it, BLM is kind of a weird, quote, organization. There are groups all over the country, and there is some kind of central organization, but it's kind of vague. But I'm not going to try to put a percentage on it, but the vast majority of time, when people say, I support BLM, they're talking about a movement, not an organization. And personally, I find it kind of disingenuous of people who say, well, I'm not going to support the movement because the organization wrote a paragraph in their 2016 founding document that was anti-Zionist and conceivably anti-Semitic. There has been a lot of recognition by leaders of the BLM movement. I just, while you were chatting, again, Googled BLM charter and what their current positions are. It is hard to find. I didn't find anything in the 5 minutes that I looked. Anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist comments by even the central organization. So I hate to say this, but I have to question, and I hope I'm not offending anybody on the call, whether some people who radically don't support the BLM movement are using this major flaw in something that happened 4 years ago, and people have worked to correct as they're avoiding dealing with something else within themselves. That's all I've got to say.
And look, I appreciate that, Daniel. I sometimes think that, look, I'm guilty of it sometimes too when it comes to other causes. We're all so busy in our day-to-day lives, especially right now, dealing with our own sense of frustration and concern for our future, that I think it's easy to find excuses not to get involved. There's so many problems and there's so many issues. And so I think when people find something, oh, that's my excuse. And whether or not what they feel about blacks or not, I think it's an easy excuse to say, I don't care. When they see something about, what you referenced about the charter. So I don't know. I'd like to think that I don't think people are racist. I think it's just an easy excuse. But
Can I add something to that? I think also it's the nature of our news cycle that the inflammatory thing gets a headline, but then when somebody goes back over the last 4 years and reworks things and re-edits, we never see the result of that. And that's just the nature of news today. You see the inflammatory thing and not the correction.
I couldn't say this on the pulpit, but I had a friend the other day. She put it well. She said, I can't watch cable news anymore. It's pornography. And I said, pornography? I said, what do you mean? She said, it's there to grab your attention. That's all it is. It's censored pornography, there to be centralized and grab your attention and keep your interest and drive up their ratings. And that's all it is. And you're so right, Jennifer. It's really sad how it's become something that is really, it lacks a lot of depth. And it's
that's
there.
The old saying in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads, right? I mean, that's still true. And now it's not just in print, it's visually. And so we're bombarded with all of these things all the time. And you can only remember and process so many things.
Yeah. Right.
I think the challenge of the intersection of the pro-Israel community and the current situation is that some of these organizations, you can look at the gay rights movement. There are a lot of anti-Israel forces that were trying, may have had marginal success, I'm not sure, to expand the agenda of the gay rights movement away from just focus on gay rights. So, they have this thing called pinkwashing. I mean, they were really beating up on Israel when Israel was one of the leading countries in the world providing equal rights to their gay citizens. And I think in this situation, it's the same thing. I would bet if you watched all the videos of all of the protests that have gone on the last 2 or 3 weeks, 90% or more of the people that were marching, even if they had a Black Lives Matter sign, don't know anything about the organization. They're there, I hope, for altruistic reasons. So,
I think that's what I was kind of trying to say, Lee, about the difference. BLM has gotten to mean two things in my mind. There is definitely an organization that we may or may not have problems with, but it's also a movement. And apparently this is not me making this up. I read about it. The Black Lives movement is very diverse. Now, does it intersectionality get way out of control? Absolutely. But I can babble too long. Sorry.
Right. Well, we saw that about the women's protests, the women's march movement. Now that was maybe a little different because all the founders, were very almost all the founders were very problematic, and they started bringing in Nation of Islam, and some of their founders praised.
That wasn't something that was buried in a website manifesto somewhere. That was vocal. Different. That was continuing in vocal.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, really, Jennifer. That was what they were about.
Yeah.
And they didn't really hide that.
Yeah.
Rabbi, can I ask a question? It's Diane Levy.
Yeah.
I am really struggling with other Jews who are using they put themselves out there as being the the gatekeepers to Judaism. You know, I'm more religious than you. I observe more than you. Yet all of their thoughts, they're just posting racist things. And I am having such a hard time rectifying how you can be a Jew and have any of these beliefs and not believe to save a life is to save the world. I saw one put on Facebook by a relative that was criticizing Chuck Schumer over kneeling with the entire Black caucus because Jews don't kneel. Who does he think he is that Jews don't kneel to anybody? And you know me, it's hard to keep my mouth shut. And I'm practicing as much self-control as I can muster up without just walking to their house and slapping them. But what do we say to fellow Jews? I've been called a horrible Jew by someone very active in this community because of my being so out there for human rights and for what is right and wrong. And because I don't criticize AOC and the three other horrible anti-Jewish people in the Democratic Party, okay, guilty. I don't agree with them. That's not number one on my agenda. I'd rather be positive to the other 99% that are. But I just cannot handle anymore Jews rectifying the nonsense that's going on in this country while putting them out there as righteous Jews. Help me out.
Well, you know, and I was surprised. I had one congregant, I was shocked, who sent me an email, and this was to the rabbi, who said, "This is going to shock you," and it almost makes you want to cry. He said, "It
will not shock me, I promise."
Yeah, he said the world's better without someone like George Floyd. He said he was, you know, and listed all the crimes and all the things he has done, and said, you know, almost saying he deserved to die. And what I responded to him was, that's what the Nazis said about us. You know, when Jews were killed by Nazis, they said the world was better, and they stereotyped all Jews. And so when we say things like this particular congregant was saying to me, we're acting like Nazis. We're saying, you know, certain blacks or blacks don't deserve to live because one or two of them, or a small minority of them, may be criminals. Every group of people has criminals. Every group of people has bad apples. We have our share in the Jewish people, for sure. And so when you say someone like George Floyd shouldn't be here because he was X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't really matter, then you're just as bad as the white supremacists. And I was getting so sick. I must have gotten 24 people who emailed me. Maybe some of you saw it, but there was a video making its rounds on YouTube. It's about a 20-minute video. It's by an intelligent Black woman, a conservative Black woman, who basically talks about how George Floyd shouldn't be a role model, and why are we making him a martyr? And then she goes into this whole rant about that the blacks should be Republicans, it should be more conservative, and that's the way to improve their lot. And it was completely missing the point of what the protesters were doing. And so I try to redirect some of our more conservative members to remind them that some of the things they say is exactly what anti-Semites have always said about us and still say today. I remind them also that white supremacists are not their friends. You don't want to be in their ballpark. And they hate us as much as they hate blacks, if not more. And so you don't even want to say things that could resemble what white nationalists are saying today. Finally, I remind them as well that, and Diane, you alluded to this, that as Jews, all the more so, and the values that we hold dear, the value that we really changed the world for the better. And thank God most good people in the world believe this value today, the value in every single human life. It's not a value we could take for granted. In fact, it's a fairly new value if you look at human history. It's a value that's really, thank God, become more accepted in the Western world, really throughout the world today. But if you look at history, human life wasn't always valued the way it is today. And unfortunately, we still see some people who have a hard time valuing the lives of others. if they don't share the same skin color. And all the more so, we as Jews have to be on the forefront of reminding the world of the value that Abraham introduced to the world, that Moses, through the Torah, said to the world that all people are made in the image of God. And that's a value that we as Jews have worked for thousands of years. And it's why so many people have hated us over the years, because we reminded them that all humans are equal, no matter their status, no matter their religion, no matter their skin color. And tyrants over the centuries have tried to destroy us because we've held fast to those views. And so we share those values with good people everywhere, whether they're liberals or conservatives, black or white. And so I agree with you, Diane. It's troubling when people turn this political. And if they disagree with Democrats or don't want Joe Biden to win, they're entitled to their belief. But don't criticize certain politicians because they may be more open to certain views that they believe will improve race relations. They have to separate it. And so it's a shame how this has become so political. The killing of George Floyd was, I think, a moment we all shared, the disgust of what we saw in that video. And unfortunately, just in a matter of a few days, it became very political.
But one of the things I worry about when I hear comments like you opened up what you just said, it seems like we have willful ignorance over basic democratic constitutional concepts like due process, cruel and unusual punishment. I mean, people are quoting the Second Amendment ad nauseum, but they don't seem to have read anything else. They don't have, and it's educational. We've dropped, I think, an awful lot of our civics, what we used to call when I was a kid, civics.
Oh,
which is like close to civilization, you know?
Yeah.
Civility, civics.
Well, it doesn't help that some of our elected leaders are not the best role models. And I think it's affected everyone. And some of our elected officials not only set the example, but also are byproducts of the age in which we live in too.
Just FYI, Rabbi, you have congregants who I have known my whole life, specifically one who I'm coming to mind right now, that is on Facebook as a Jew in this city, a picture of black men all over a car next to a picture of monkeys all over a car, and said, if you can tell the difference, let me know. A member of Beth Yeshurun. Okay, I just want you to understand.
It's terrible.
What you're dealing with. It's not, and you know, they can post pro-Trump junk all day long. That's not my issue. It's theirs. Yeah. But you know, I can argue. I'll go toe to toe with anybody on the issues. But when you're dealing with people like that, there is no discussion. There is no discussion. And
I think we have to. And I agree. That's obviously unacceptable and embarrassing for our community. I think what my hope is we can find a middle ground where I think liberals and conservatives can agree on basic Jewish traditional values that would implore us to go out and fight for better race relations, that command us to do what we can to work for the betterment of our fellow Black Americans. And so let's hold the discussion. I hope you guys will all join me next Thursday. I didn't get to the second part I wanted to show you, which are some traditional texts that may surprise you about what our rabbis had to say about African Blacks and about what we as Jews need to do to help them and what we need as Jews need to do to improve race relations, going back thousands of years. So it may be very eye-opening to you. So we'll start with that next Thursday. And hopefully next Thursday, I'll try to schedule some more time so we can make sure we get to that next piece I want to show you.
I would appreciate you doing that, Rabbi. This was very good, but a bit short.
I apologize. You know, the last few weeks we've only done like 20 minutes, and it's been a busy week just dealing with as we start to explore what we're going to do at the high holidays. So I've got all kinds of conferences this week and trying to get a lot done now about that. That's kind of taken a whole new.
Your work is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate y'all joining. And if you have a chance, go back and I gave a sermon about this, and Rabbi Morgan and Rabbi Horowitz gave just superb sermons on this subject.
Terrific.
And I think you can find them on our website. on our Facebook and YouTube page, and we're gonna
If
post
you have
them
any trouble
over.
finding them, let me know and I'll send
Yeah.
them your way.
They're
Can you
really well
post
done.
it?
Thank you.
Jennifer Bryan, can you post the article you just, can that be posted on the website?
It is on the website. I'll send you a link to it.
Oh, it
Okay,
is.
great.
We already got that on. Good.
I think it is.
Okay, I'd asked. I know Ashley was going to put that under the race.
I'll
research.
make sure it's there.
And if not, yeah, you could send it to Lee, and it's a good article.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, y'all have a good day, and I'll see y'all soon.
Thank you
a
so
lot.
much.
Thanks,
You
everyone.
too. Take
Thanks,
care.
guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.